Um, Good evening, everyone. I don't speak any word of German, so you'll have to excuse me. I have to present in English. I always start with this slide because I never assume anyone knows where I'm from, because it's a very small country in the middle of Africa. So Rwanda, that's my country, that's where I'm from. We didn't have a school of architecture until 2008. So you can imagine, but I wanted to be an architect so bad, despite that I had never met an architect in my life. True story. I had never met an architect in my life. So you can imagine that basically my path until I was 18 years old was to finish high school, go to medical school probably, get married, have wife and kids, and build my house and live happily ever after, right? Well, I didn't go to medical school because in my introduction they say I went to China, to Shanghai specifically. I went to the School of Architecture and Urban Planning of Tongji University. I applied for scholarships and I got one there. The time I was in Shanghai between 2002 2008 was incredible for an architect student to witness because there was massive transformation in China. There was an incredible development in terms of design and architecture to support the massive development, economic development that China was registering in those years. But while I was learning like architecture in general, there were three specific problems that I started noticing that were reaching unprecedented levels and that were a little bit familiar with my home country. One was the challenge of designing with environmental issues in mind. Second was dealing with massive population. As you all know, China now is still the largest population on Earth. And the third was developing the talent that was needed to design and build contextually appropriate infrastructure and buildings needed. Because this is also the time China was importing a lot of European architecture, literally creating European towns in China. For real. They are there. I've seen them. So environmental issues like the pollution in China that we've all heard in the news, and massive displacement of population claims that we've all seen or heard of were symptoms of larger societal problems that seem very familiar to my country. So when I went home in Rwanda in 2010, I had a serious case of deja vu because the country was also in a rapid economic transformation. There was this drive to want to come back from the tragedy we had in 1994. However, when we started looking at it closely, when I started looking at it closely, I started noticing that those problems, we were meeting them in Rwanda faster, but they were basically the continent problem. Right now, Rwanda is the most densely fastest growing country on the continent. But that's just a reflection of these numbers because the Africa population in general is going to reach 2.4 billion people by 2050. And what that means is we're going to surpass the population of China and India combined in less than 35 years. And that's quite scary. And being an architect, we started analyzing this data in more details, not just looking at them as the next big opportunity that everybody speaks about. So we're wondering if these are the projection, if we're saying more than, if we're saying currently 40% of Africa population lives in cities, and I'm not sure that you all know the current situation of African cities, but they're not very good, I can tell you. And we're saying that in 2050, when we were 2.4 billion, more than half of that population is going to be living in cities, you, as a professional working in the architecture field, you start asking yourselves questions, serious questions. And that's what we did. We said, what does that mean when you say all those statistics? Well, let me put this in perspective for you. For us to accommodate such population increase, we're going to have to create more than 700 million dwelling units by 2050. If that wasn't enough, we're going to have to create more than 300,000 schools, basic education schools. And we need more than 85,000 primary healthcare delivery clinics and health centers. So we know, as professionals working on the continent, we have to tackle these challenges. But we want to have a global approach where we would bring the best and the brightest people in the field, learn from the best practice, right, to help tackle this challenge. So I joined Mass Design Group in 2010. Basically, our mission at Mass is to design, advocate for architecture that promotes justice and human dignity. That's basically it. So by understanding on a deep level of what we were asked to respond to bigger needs of our partners, we had to reflect on our role as professionals to solve future-built environments needs. So we've come to learn that tackling huge demands for quality infrastructure is not enough, but you also have to leverage the power of design to create positive change. And that is imperative everywhere, every time. You have to do that. So that's what you try to do. I'm going to give an example of just one project. In 2006, this is Butaro Hospital. It's a hospital designed in Rwanda, in the north of Rwanda. We were asked to design a district hospital for a district of 400,000 people, which didn't have a single general practitioner for the entire district. So we saw Butaro as an opportunity to take a closer look at the healthcare delivery system in rural Africa, as currently stands. So instead of just designing the houses that we're going to house this hospital, we looked at the issues that the healthcare delivery in rural Africa were faced. And one of them, which is a really big one, was airborne infection control. It's still a very big issue at the moment. So we focused on that issue, and we took advantage of both the really nice climate of Rwanda and the hilly terrain that we inherited to design a safe fail passive system, basically so that the winds crossing from the valley to valley when time changes allows that cross ventilation to happen, but also placing like all waiting areas and corridors outdoors, but covered so that you minimize the risk of these nosocomial infections. The other thing we did was also to challenge the traditional notion of around patient-centric designs. So there were things that were done that were proven to hinder patients' recovery. And one of them, which is a very easy one, is the ward design, the open ward design. Traditionally, you'll find in a lot of rural areas in Africa, you have wards where patients are facing each other, and science had proven that psychologically it doesn't help a patient to recover faster when they're looking at another suffering patient. So one of the very simple thing we did was to flip the wards, have like a single loaded ward, but flip the beds so that everybody has like a view and a window to the outside. And the DNA of how Butaro was designed has seen success that we've started working with the governments. This is the standards we developed with the government of Liberia, and these are standards we developed with the government of Rwanda to start to rethink on the minimum standards for hospital designs in rural Africa. And at the moment, this hospital, Muni District Hospital, doesn't look like Butaro at all, but the basic principles on how this Butaro was designed are the ones that drove this next generation of rural healthcare delivery in Africa. So we've had these successes in Butaro, but we also realized that the majority of the population we serve are this on the continent. So we understood that we had to scale these successes, and that's in a systemic way, and not just in projects. So that's one reason why we created the African Design Center, to equip graduate architects and designers with both soft and hard skills to ready them to tackle the most pressing global issues of the future with design for maximum impact solutions. And we recognize the need to empower younger generations of architects and designers to scale what we call the low fab. The low fab is basically an endeavor for architects and designers to, before I get to that, I want to point to this. So currently, the African Union of Architects estimate that the accounts for about 35,000 architects practicing on the continent, of African nationals. Take that into consideration when you compare it to Italy, that accounts for about 125,000 architects, and the maps are on scale. So in addition to want to create more talent, we also needed to create quality talent. That's the African Design Center. So I was talking about the locally fabricated. So locally fabricated is basically has four endeavors that we urge each architect and designers who goes through this center to understand. In our project implementation, we need to hire locally as much as we can, because that's important. Someone earlier said something that caught my attention. They said, we need to consider socioeconomic and political conditions that allow an idea to be conceivable. I believe that was Karen. I think that kind of resonated a lot with me. We have to source regionally as much as we can. We cannot afford to we can't afford to build 700 million dwelling units by importing them from China. I don't think that's going to be possible. And then every project we do or we approach, every design concept needs to embed an idea of both training and learning ourselves, because learning is a constant dynamic thing that needs to happen. And the last thing, and that is most important and that ties all of this together, is upholding the dignity of people we work with and that we want to serve, because we believe architecture shouldn't only be there to provide solutions, but it should be there to be a catalyst for positive systemic change. So how is it supposed to work? So the African Design Center is supposed to work through three tracks: design, research, and advocacy. And then through this, there's going to be workshops, seminars, and practices and studios that around those three tracks to bring the fellows, the students' capacity to the level where through design they can understand basically the whole project process from early ideation, design concepts, to material sourcing, material processing, and installations. That's very, very important. Every architect who's practicing should know and understand that process, so that we can deliver quality designs to communities that would otherwise not have access to, up to date. And then through research, it's important that we understand that what building technology exists, what material exists out there, that we can tap into for localized creative solutions to solve those problems. And then the last one is advocacy. How do we tell those stories, those successful stories? How do we equip these designers with communication tools to promote the use of advanced technologies and capabilities to conceive sophisticated systems with the aim of improving fabrication practices around our projects? Existing or teachable human skills and show proof that dignifying solutions are achievable. And basically, the African Design Center, this is my last slide, we want it to be an institute for continued education and global research hub, where talent from all over the world can come to tackle the big issues facing our planet, like climate change, for instance. We want it to be a cultural hub where the potential and diversity of our cultures is valorized, exhibited, and celebrated, because that's very important. We want the ADC to be a think tank for bigger conversations such as this about the future of architecture and design, especially the role we have and the power of design to change our society for good. Thank you so much for having me.